and I am very pleased today to welcome Karen Davis, PhD, Dr. Karen Davis. Karen is the president and founder of United Poultry Concerns in the US. It's a nonprofit organization that promotes the compassionate and respectful treatment of domestic fowl, and that includes chickens, turkeys, etc. There's also a sanctuary that they have for chickens in Virginia. Karen was inducted to the National Animal Rights Hall of Fame for outstanding contributions to animal liberation. She has been active since the 1980s and started the United Poultry Concerns in 1990. Karen's the author of numerous books, essays, and articles and campaigns, too many for me to actually go into in detail, so I just picked a couple to mention. She's written an inside look at the modern poultry industry, More Than Meat. And she has her latest book, which is For the Birds, From Exploitation to Liberation, essays on chickens, turkeys, and other domesticated fowl. And I would like to turn it over to Karen, who's going to be speaking on the beauty and sentience of chicken and turkeys. Oh, just one thing to note, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section on Facebook or post them in our chat. And exciting things here, we are going to be drawing for a $25 gift card from Vacant Supply Canada if you have a question. So think about those questions now. Now, Karen, over to you.
Thank you for this nice introduction, and I'm delighted to be speaking to people with Earth Save Canada. It's a real pleasure and a real opportunity to speak for the birds who I've been speaking on behalf of for several decades. And I have the deepest appreciation for chickens and turkeys. And I have to say that until I got to know them in the mid-1980s, I really was very unfamiliar with these birds. I did not know chickens and turkeys at all. So it's been a privilege and a pleasure for me to get to know them and to have the opportunity to speak on their behalf. I always tell people that they are not voiceless. They have voices, but they need our voice, capital V, in the public domain, because people don't know who these birds are. They don't know them other than maybe they're farmers, which is not a way to get to know those whom you know only as those you exploit. And if you're an ordinary person in a suburb or a city, you don't know these birds because all you know is what they appear to be in the meat counter or the egg counter or the milk counter. So we won't speak about the milk counter because that's the cows and the goats, but speaking of these birds. So I'll just give a little background here about how I got involved with chickens and turkeys, ultimately to the point of founding United Poultry Concerns in October of 1990 as a 501c3 organization dedicated to promoting the compassionate and respectful treatment of chickens, turkeys, ducks, and other domesticated birds. And the thing I want to point out too is that when we speak about domesticated fowl, we're speaking particularly of those birds who have the misfortune of being regarded as a food source for human beings. So for example, that also includes quails and all kinds of pheasants. And in fact, many people are not aware that chickens are pheasants. They're a type of pheasant, and they are all related to one another as having evolved in the tropical forests of Southeast Asia and the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. And certainly an important point to make about these birds is that despite all of the intensive breeding that has been inflicted upon them for meat and or eggs, despite all of these deformations of their bodies to basically exist only as a food production trait, these birds are not any different within themselves than their wild counterparts. And I speak as someone who has been spending almost 40 years, every day of my life, with chickens. And although we don't have any turkeys right now, we've had several turkeys from the turkey meat industry. And I will say a little bit more about them as I proceed here. But these birds are very aware, they're very conscious, they're very intelligent. And I also think it's important for people to know that scientifically, birds are, including chickens and turkeys, ducks, and so on, are now recognized by neuroscientists as having the same brain, basically, the same emotions and intellect and feelings that human beings do. So they are not all that different from us. They might have different bodies, shapes, feathers, instead of just plain old skin, but they are related to us through evolution. And birds are our evolutionary kin, the same as other mammals are. So, as I said, I did not know these birds growing up. I grew up in a semi-rural environment in Altoona, Pennsylvania in the 1940s and 50s. And that community was very much into hunting, sport hunting, as it continues to be to this day. And it wasn't until I became maybe 12 or 13 years old that I began to argue with my father at the dinner table about hunting and how cruel it was to be out there shooting rabbits and pen-raised pheasants. I eventually learned that pheasants are raised specifically to trust humans because they are fed by human beings in their pens, and to be completely bewildered when they are set loose on the first day of hunting season for the sheer gratification of hunters just shooting them. This is an ancient tradition in Britain, and all of that has been transferred here to the United States as well as to Canada. I believe canned pheasant hunts occur in Canada probably too. But I began to be more conscious of animal suffering, and I would fight with my father at the dinner table. We had a lot of loud yelling back and forth, but essentially his attitude was, well, you know, everything hunts the rabbit, so that's okay then. And he just never really seemed to understand that there was something wrong with hunting animals for the pleasure of it, as long as one's hunting was confined to the rules and times of allowable hunting. That was the only ethical aspect that he seemed to recognize. So I grew up with a very strong feeling for birds in particular all my life. And eventually I got a part-time volunteer job at Farm Sanctuary in the mid-1980s. When I learned about them, they were just a new organization just starting out in Avondale, Pennsylvania. And I worked there for a summer in, as I recall, was 1987. And that was where I really got to know chickens and turkeys, and also geese and ducks. Around the same time, the home that my then husband, Alan Kate, and I rented in Maryland outside Washington, D.C., and what was still then a rural remnant in Montgomery County, Maryland. There, it turned out that our landlady raised about 100 chickens every year so that she could maintain her agricultural tax status. So she didn't have to pay taxes because she was raising about 100 chickens. So I've told the story many times about how one day in June, shortly after Alan and I moved to that little house that we were renting, I walked down a little leafy path straight into a shed, a sort of rickety shed. And I went around to the door and I pulled the shoestring that held the latch against the loop and opened it up. And to my amazement, there were all these big white chickens. Now, of course, I have since learned that those extremely large young white chickens are what the industry calls broiler chickens. They don't even call them broiler chickens. They just call them broilers. And what we in the animal advocacy movement now refer to as Cornish crosses, or simply as Cornish chickens. First of all, to get rid of that ugly name, broiler, and also because these birds are, their foundational genetic nature is a Cornish cross with another like white Plymouth Rock type of bird. All of these, of course, have been bred artificially by human beings based on the birds who were brought to Europe from Southeast Asia during the Middle Ages and ultimately brought to the Americas to be used as food sources for humans. And one of the most touching things I ever read was about how the birds on the ships, when they were very disconsolate on the ships coming from England, for example, to America. And as soon as the ship got closer to land, still in the water, but closer to land, the birds would perk up and the roosters would start to crow and the hens would start to make their clucking sounds. And they were aware that they were reaching land, which is what they're supposed to be on. Chickens evolved on the earth. That doesn't mean they don't love to drink a lot of water. And since they're from the tropical forests, they enjoy rain as well. And they also are covered with preen oil, which they distribute all over their bodies constantly by preening with their beaks. They have a preen gland, which creates this oil. And so they like sprinkling water, and they're not particularly happy about being outside in a downpour. But I've heard people say things like, oh, well, you know, chickens will drown in the rain. Well, that's not true. They don't drown in the rain. They evolved to be able to cope with rain and to deal with sprinkling rain versus something closer to a downpour. They know how to go inside their houses if they don't want to get soaking wet. And they also, here at our sanctuary in Machipongo, Virginia, they like to go under the shelter of the trees because we have 12,000 square feet of totally predator-proof enclosure, a big, huge outdoor aviary, but it has wire all over the top. And of course, a lot of foliage and branches and so on accumulate on top of the wire roof. And so when the chickens go under the trees, into the trees and under that roof, it's basically rain-free. And they know how to do all those things. I mean, chickens are very, very adaptable, and so are turkeys. So anyway, I eventually adopted a rooster who I named Henry, who was a very angry bird when I first met him. I had met him at a small farmed animal sanctuary that was at the time being run by people for the ethical treatment of animals. And I met Henry there, and he was severely debeaked. He was from the broiler chicken industry and had obviously fallen off a truck and had been rescued by somebody who took him to the PETA sanctuary. And I brought him home and I got to know him. And when I first brought him home, he was so scared of people and he was visibly angry. He was an angry bird, justifiably. But after he had been with Alan and me for a very short time, he became completely the opposite. He loved to be hugged. He loved to be held. He was so thrilled when we put him in our landlady's tomato garden that he actually groaned with joy he was like saying, is all of this for me? After the life he had lived and was on his way to be killed in a slaughter plant. And here he is with a whole tomato garden of his own and wonderful food and affection. And he responded to all of that. And it was just so moving to see him really just transform himself from somebody who did not want to be touched at all to a bird who loved to be touched and loved to be hugged and who would hug you right back. So, I had another hen, another bird early on, whom I named Tulip. And she was from our landlady's flock. And that was the last year our landlady kept chickens for whatever reason. But Tulip was crippled as Viva had been. And I brought Tulip into the house, and Tulip loved to sit on the floor pillow with me and watch TV in the evening. And she would actually snore. You could hear her snoring. Well, one day we were sitting there watching TV and Tulip was sleeping at my side. And all of a sudden I saw this very large beetle crossing the floor. And Tulip just woke up immediately. I mean, she must have felt the vibrations on the floor or something, but she woke up immediately and she just, on her crippled legs, she just went over there and she grabbed up that large beetle who was immediately consumed. And I said to her, Tulip, you're a vegan. And of course, she didn't care. She was a vegan with me, but her instincts were to do what chickens do, which is they will eat worms and they will eat bugs. And, in other words, they're not vegan themselves, although they can be vegan. And what we feed our birds is entirely vegan rations. That is cracked corn, cracked whole wheat, black oil seeds, which they love, and, various types of vegetables and things, melons, grapes, because really they are omnivores. They really like a lot of different things. So some of the things we hear about chickens and turkeys that are so mean-spirited and really ignorant are that they're stupid and dirty. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. For one thing, chickens, as I mentioned, like turkeys, preen themselves. They are constantly cleaning their feathers. They are constantly maintaining their plumage through preening and through the dust bathing that they do routinely. By dust bathing, they get rid of built up oils in their skin, they get rid of debris, and they keep themselves clean and refreshed. And anybody who has ever adopted a chicken, for example, from a factory farm, from a place where she never set foot on the earth before, will agree with me that about the first thing she or he, in the case of a rooster, wants to do is to start scratching in the earth, start wallowing in the earth, start pecking at the earth and making a dust bowl, which for her or him is comparable to a cleansing and refreshing water bath for humans. So that's what they want to do. They want to be clean. The same as with turkeys. Turkeys take wonderful big dust baths. And it's also a way, as I have read, and I see this with my own eyes, that chickens and turkeys cool themselves when the weather is extremely hot. So they know how to cool themselves by taking a dust bath. They know how to hold their wings out from their bodies in order to cool their bodies. And they have a very, very good, clear, intimate sense of how to use their bodies to optimize their well-being and feeling well. So the idea that chickens are dirty reflects only one thing: ignorance, and the fact that people are simply repeating things they've heard without any actual firsthand experience. But also, obviously, that chickens and other domesticated fowl are kept in squalor by farmers, and not all farmers, but it has been pretty traditional that these birds are going to be kept in situations that in which they cannot keep themselves clean. And in those situations, the same as with human beings all crowded together in an enclosure, then they begin to develop a bad body odor, just like we would or anybody else in such conditions. And the place is dirty, and then they develop lice and mites and things like that. And so essentially they endure being blamed for a situation that has been inflicted upon them by people who do not keep them and care for them properly. If people come to our sanctuary, they're certainly going to meet chickens. And right now we have one female duck who's been with us for a long time from a hoarding situation. And also we have one lovely peahen named Mary Suzanne, and they all get along really well. But you will not walk into any of the houses in which our birds live and smell any ammonia fumes or anything that suggests uncleanliness. And if you pick up one of our chickens, for example, and bury your nose in their feathers, if they'll let you do that, you will see how nice they smell, and that they have a nice fresh body fragrance. So chickens want to be clean, turkeys want to be clean, and it's only when they are not given the opportunity by the humans who have control over them that they develop the effects that they get blamed for, but it's not their fault. They're stuck. So again, we hear falsely that chickens and turkeys are dirty, which they're not. And then we hear things like, well, they're so stupid. And, I've heard that a whole lot from various people over the years, that chickens are not intelligent. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. First of all, animals have to be intelligent in order to live successfully in this world. You can't be stupid and at the same time raise families, negotiate complex environments, because even if an environment is relatively stable, it's not static. And every day, alert parents of whether they're chickens or goats or whoever they may be, turkeys, they have to be on the lookout for all different kinds of predators who could attack them or their young. And they have to be constantly on the lookout for food. And they have to, for example, take a mother hen, and I include the mother chicken hen and the mother turkey hen. First of all, they go to some trouble to not only locate, they go to trouble to find a place where the hen wants to lay her eggs. So they're looking for a place, and in the case of chickens, roosters in the natural world will accompany the hens to help look for the place that would be suitable to raise, to incubate the eggs and raise the chicks. So the rooster and the hen in a natural setting will trot off together, and they will check out various possible locations until the hen and the rooster are satisfied that this is the place. And what they're looking for is a place that's comfortable for the hen, that is camouflaged so that she and her eggs, and then ultimately her chicks, will not be attacked, will not be discovered by predators. And they are also looking for a place that is close to a water source and some kind of food source, which of course in the natural world is found by digging in the ground and finding insects and so forth. So one of the interesting things that I learned about hens on a nest, both hens, roosters, turkeys and chicken hens, is that they get up every single day until the last few days of hatching of their young last 2 or 3 days, they get up every day, the mother hen, to eat, drink, defecate, and stretch their wings. They do this for 15 to 20 minutes a day, and then they go back to sitting on their nests. And the poultry industry, which has these huge incubators, which are filled with drawers into which the fertile eggs are placed and in which the baby birds are hatched. Well, the poultry industry has to imitate that 15 or 20 minutes when the hen would leave her nest for the purposes I just described. They have to they have to cool down the incubator to match what the mother hen does. So anyway, the mother hen sits on her eggs for 21 days in the case of chickens. And in the case of turkeys, I think it's about 26, 28 days. And the whole time the mother hen is on her nest, the mother hen and her babies are communicating. The babies are communicating information to the mother that they need to be slightly repositioned inside the egg, that they may feel too cool or cold or too warm or humid. And the mother hen recognizes these signals, these requests, you might say, from the baby chicks in the egg, the embryos, and she very carefully, very minutely makes these adjustments. So the babies and the mother hen, by the time the babies are ready to struggle out of their shells, they all know each other. By the time they're born, they all know each other. And there is some indication that even a sense of smell accompanies them as a way of knowing each other. So first of all, chickens and turkeys have excellent eyesight, way beyond ours. They see close up, they see far away, they see on both sides, and they have excellent vision. They have excellent hearing, better than ours. So I learned from a poultry guy once upon a time that a reason that chickens, other types of pheasants, and basically any type of forest-dwelling bird or other type of animal has to have excellent hearing, because if they're living in an environment filled with dense foliage, as in a tropical forest, they need to be able to hear each other through the foliage when they can't necessarily see each other. So the birds, when they are born, they come into this world with excellent eyesight, excellent hearing, and the mother hen, whether turkey or chicken, one thing she will do is she will help to pick off pieces of shell that are sticking to the newborn, very carefully pick it off so that the newborn is nice and clean. And of course, the newborn chick has to dry out. And once all the viable chicks and the turkey poults, the word for baby turkeys is poult, P-O-U-L-T. So once the poults and the mother chicken hens once the poults and the baby chicks have all been born, all of those who are viable, who are not already, dead in the shell for one reason or another, once they're all ready to go, then the mother hen, the turkey mother, off they go to explore the world, to learn about what's edible and what isn't, to just get to know each other and to get to know the environment in which they're going to be living. And one of the wonderful things, well, here's the third thing that you hear about chickens and turkeys, which is just rubbish. Not only, well, they're not clean and they're stupid, but that they're cowardly. Every time I hear that, I only laugh because I'm not really laughing because it's pathetic, because again, people who think that an animal is dirty, stupid, and cowardly is certainly going to use those mistaken ideas to justify mistreating them. But the fact is, anybody who has really spent any time around chickens and turkeys knows that they are not cowardly at all. So a mother hen and the rooster will fight to the death, if need be, if they encounter a predator who could endanger their babies. In the case of the mother chicken hen and the mother turkey, they will often simply quickly enfold they have a signal to their baby chicks to come under my wings and hide under there, or they will use their wings to wave the chicks behind them to go into an area of dense foliage where they will be hidden out of sight. One of my favorite anecdotes was a letter to the editor of a Virginia-based magazine a few years ago, where the person describes encountering in the woods in Virginia a mother turkey with her baby poults. And they're sauntering along, and all of a sudden appears a hawk overhead. And this person describes how immediately the mother turkey put the babies behind her in a safe, sheltering, a leafy wooded place. And she flew up to where that hawk was ready to swoop down and grab up one of those babies. And the mother turkey was actually, by that time, her body was parallel to the ground. She was like her breast was on top, and her back was parallel with the ground. And she hit at that hawk, and physically. And the hawk flew a little ways away and then circled back to try to get one of those babies again. And the mother turkey just as quickly flew at that hawk and hit the hawk again. And the hawk gave up. The hawk flew away. So that is one example of how brave a turkey mother will be, and how she will defend her babies and do whatever it takes to save them from a predator. And as far as chicken hens are concerned, of course, I've read a lot about how brave Mother Chicken is, really going back to writings in the Middle Ages and to Plutarch and other writers who have written very eloquently and observantly of chickens. And of course, there's universal acclaim amongst some such writers of the bravery and just the attentiveness and the care that a mother hen, a chicken hen, gives to her babies. And for example, of course, they love the babies to crawl all over their bodies, and roosters like to have their baby chicks crawl all over their bodies, and they'll actually take the baby chick. The roosters will take the baby chick. They'll carry them on their back up a little ladder into a chicken house that is raised off the ground. But anyway, even though we do not allow our chickens to hatch chicks, because this is a sanctuary and we don't want to populate it with birds we have allowed to be hatched or born here, but we have to make room for birds who already exist and need a home. That being said, on 3 different occasions, we ended up with, in two occasions, 1 baby chick being born in the winter, which is one reason was because it was winter, and I thought, well, 1 egg under this hen and it's very cold out, don't expect it'll go anywhere. But in each case, lo and behold, a baby chick emerged from that single egg, and I got a chance to watch this mother hen be so attentive and so careful with that baby chick and just caring for in both cases, it was a female baby who was born. And one of the interesting things to watch is how when a mother hen is raising her baby chick and teaching the baby chick, they're in a kind of enchanted circle where all of the other birds will give them space. The roosters will not attempt to mate with the mother hen during that time, and everybody kind of stays back and lets the mother hen with her chick or her chicks do their parent chick roaming and experiencing together. Now, in one case, the one where one baby chick was born in our sanctuary many years ago, the rooster who hung around the two of them, I believed had to have been the father, because he was one of these very sweet-natured, large red roosters. And he was just so like, he was part of their little family. And he didn't bother them at all, but he liked to visit the two of them when they would be in their nest in the chicken house. And he just acted like he was the father of this baby chick, which was just charming to observe. More recently, in 2018, we had a little brood of 5 baby chicks born here in our sanctuary in Machipongo, Virginia. And what happened was, it was a May Day, on a Saturday, and on the weekdays, as long as I'm in town, I take over the care of the sanctuary, the cleaning and all of the work that needs to be done. Whereas on the weekdays, our sanctuary helpers come in and do that work. Well, so it was a nice May Day in 2018, and I was walking around and gathering the eggs, and it could have been 2019. I'm not sure, but it was one of those 2 years. Anyway, I was walking around as I always do, and as our sanctuary helpers do, gathering the eggs so they will not be turned into baby chicks. And since we have roosters and hens living together, I assume that most of the eggs that our hens lay are fertile. That is, there's an embryo inside. So we gather the eggs and we hard boil a lot of them and feed them back to the chickens. And we also just crack the eggs and give them back to the chickens right there on the spot. Because the fact is that the purpose of the egg is to be very nutritious for the embryo who is growing inside, so that when we give the eggs back to the chickens, we are giving them a nourishing food source and something that they do like to eat. And in fact, when I worked at Farm Sanctuary, I discovered that all the animals, if it was like the pigs and the goats and the chickens and the ducks and the turkeys, if an egg fell off out of the pan in the little barn that we worked in at the time, it was like every animal there. There were only very few animals at that time. That was in the mid-1980s. But it was like they all heard the egg crack on the floor, and they would come rushing in and just to eat that one egg. And it was like the whole sanctuary was like on alert and they all ran in to get those eggs. So definitely, animals do like eggs. So anyway, this May Day, I was gathering eggs and walking around. So we have a lot of very wooded areas in our sanctuary. Again, it's completely predator proof, but it's completely outdoors. So we have all these wooded areas. We have trees and things that are all carefully wired up to the wire that's overhead. And I can't really describe it. I didn't build this place, but our wonderful maintenance man did the whole thing himself in 2014. And so anyway, I was getting ready to reach under this one brown game hen who had been rescued with others from a cockfighting ring in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I saw this white under her, this hen, and I went to pick it up, lift her up a little and pick up this egg, and there was movement there, and a little bit of sound, a little beep, beep, and I jumped back like, ah! And I was kind of horrified because they weren't supposed to do that. This was an unexpected family, and somehow I and my sanctuary helpers missed them because they were in this wooded area where they blended in, so with the colors. So anyway, it turned out there were 5 baby chicks there, and of course they were adorable, and I didn't want to disturb them. But what happened a couple of days later was that the baby chicks were so tiny still that they were able to squeeze through the wires and get to the other side of the enclosure. Well, that was terrible because, first of all, they were there in all of these greens and things that were growing on the other side. And when I went to the other side, through the gate to the other side where they were, and they were peeping very loudly, kind of shrieking, really, I kept trying to grab them, and they were very quick in escaping, even though they were just babies. And eventually, I managed one by one to be able to get them all back inside the sanctuary enclosure. Well, the mother hen, by that time, she was completely distraught. And she was shrieking, and she had all her feathers puffed up, her hackle feathers around her neck were all puffed up. And she was so distressed that when I got close to her, she jumped up and scratched my face, not because she was coming after me in particular, but she sensed danger to her babies, and that was her instinctive response. So when they were all reunited, and of course we fixed up those holes so that they could never go out there again like that. And then they grew fast enough that they no longer could have anyway, but we immediately patched up all those holes. But anyway, then immediately the mother hen just enfolded with her wings all of these dear little birds, and they have grown up here, and they have joined our other birds, all of whom are rescued, and they have just fit in wonderfully. So in a way, it was a nice thing because it gave me yet another opportunity to observe how caring and how protective a mother hen is to and toward her babies. And they're outside right now. 1 was a rooster and 4 were hens. We were glad about that because it's always easier to have hens. You don't have to worry about any rooster altercations. Although hens, I have to tell you, if people don't know this, hens can get into little tiffs with each other too, which is very cute to watch. I never interfere in anything like that because I believe they have a right to express their nature as much as possible without my interfering with them. And so every once in a while, you'll see a couple of hens get into a kind of argument with each other. And they'll actually jump over each other. Their neck feathers, their hackle feathers will be raised, and they'll be kind of growling at each other like "grr, grr," and they're angry. Something made one or both of them angry at each other. And this might take place for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then gradually one will back away, and maybe the other one wants to keep it going a little bit longer, but it never ever develops beyond that point. After just a couple minutes, whatever issues they had with each other have been resolved, and they each go off to their activities. So another example of how chickens, I guess I'd call it, they play, and they have these rituals that include getting angry with each other. They're not always happy any more than any other social beings are with each other. But one day I was sitting outside on a nice summer day, and I was reading a magazine, sitting in a chair outside with the birds, and I saw Valerie Valentine and Rhubarb, two of our roosters. Now, Valerie Valentine had his own yard area and his own group of hens, and Rhubarb had his own yard area with his group of hens. And I watched these two roosters get into what could only be called a kind of playing. They were going at each other, but they never crossed what to me was an invisible line. There was an invisible line there that each one was respecting, and each one would go up to it, and they would, like I said, they kind of run at each other, but they would stop at that line, each one on his side. So that to me was like they're having a game, and they know they're having a game. And it was one of those things that when you really spend time with chickens, you see how charming they can be and how playful they can be. And I don't want to get off track here, but I will just give an example. For example, turkeys, about whom I have read extensively. I wrote a book about turkeys called More Than a Meal: The Turkey in History, Myth, Ritual, and Reality. And it's very informative, and I recommend it. And I should also say parenthetically that all of my books are available in print. They are also all available on our homepage in PDF form. So on the left-hand side, you can just go to our PDF books and click it on, and you'll see all of the books that I have written are right there to be clicked on it and read. Well, anyway, I read extensively about turkeys in preparation for writing my book, More Than a Meal. And there were two interesting examples in one of the books I used for information about turkeys, particularly in their, well, unhappy encounters with the Europeans when the Europeans came to the Americas starting in the 15th, 16th centuries. But two anecdotes about turkeys and how they love to play. And in each case, the observer described how the turkeys would run at each other and they would chase each other around the trees. And they just were, as each observer said, and it was clear from the writing that they did of these observations, that these turkeys were clearly having fun together. They were playing, they were having a game. And the one writer talked about how he observed this game amongst the wild turkeys as it became dusk, and how eventually, after all of that scuffling around in the leaves and going at it for each other and gobbling and whatnot, all of a sudden, he said, and then they stealthily stole into the forest and were completely silent. So, you know, one of the things that I think that we don't often realize about chickens and turkeys, and probably many non-human animals, is the extent to which they have games and like to play. And they don't do everything from a purely utilitarian standpoint. It isn't like they're always like fighting off predators or looking for food. Of course, those are important parts of their lives, no question about that. But they have enjoyments, and they do things to entertain themselves. And these games are an example. Another example of what I call the joy of turkeys is provided by the writer Joe Hutto, Hutto. He wrote a book. Now, I think it came out in, as I recall, maybe 1995, I'm not really sure. But it's called Illumination in the Flatlands, A Season with the Wild Turkey. And a PBS documentary was, Public Broadcasting Service documentary was made of this book maybe 6 or 7 years ago, which is very worth watching, but it isn't as good, in my opinion, as reading the book, because there's just more in the book. There's just more speculation and observation, and just a wonderful book. But the PBS is good too. But so how Joe Hutto managed to get hold of these turkey eggs in Florida, in these flatlands in Florida, was he was on this like a plantation which was being plowed up as a canned quail hunting area. In other words, to go out there and just shoot quails, who are, I believe, installed on that land for that very purpose, just to shoot them for pleasure. So what happened, as he describes, Joe Hutto describes it, was that the tractors and whatnot, cranes and whatnot, completely ran off 2 different female turkeys from their nests and from their eggs. So somehow Joe Hutto, who happened to be there, I hope he wasn't there to shoot quails, but who knows, because he, despite all his intention to, what I would even say empathy for turkeys, he still liked to go out and kill them. You know, he didn't make any bones about that. But anyway, so he managed to rescue 2 nests filled with eggs that had embryos, turkey embryos inside. And he artificially incubated these 2 nests. And what he wrote about, I don't really recall what happened to the first nest full of the turkeys, but he concentrated his book on the other one. And he talked about, and he described very beautifully, how the baby turkeys in the morning, when he would go out to start spending his morning with them, because he was kind of their mother, their foster mother, how they'd all, the baby turkeys would all be in the tree together, and they would all be chattering. He said they'd be chattering with each other and just expressing so much joy. And when they saw him, they would jump down out of their tree limbs and they would join him. And he said they just had these, they did what he called a turkey dance. They just danced, and they danced all around him, and they were just so pleased that they were now with him, and they were ready to have their excursions and together. And he, of course, described how they just were so curious about everything and so interested in everything in the environment, and checking out things, and whether it was a snake or a rock or just peering into this and that. And he just described, you know, they're extremely curious and interested in virtually everything. Well, one of the sad things about the curiosity of turkeys is that is one of the big things that almost decimated them by the beginning of the 20th century on this continent, in Canada, the United States, Central America, South America, etc., Mexico, because there were all kinds of turkeys. The land was filled with turkeys, various types of turkeys, and they were everywhere. They were in the meadows, in the woods, etc. And the Europeans thought nothing of just shooting them for no reason. John J. Audubon, who you may know, people observing this presentation may know as a painter, famous painter of birds. Well, all the birds he painted, he shot first and killed them, and then he mounted them, and then he painted them. But he shot, he killed thousands and thousands of all kinds of birds. And he describes in one of his anecdotes how he came upon a group of turkeys and how apparently there were females and males together, and he shot one of them, and he said it was so interesting that instead of the other turkeys fleeing the scene, they all gathered round the turkey he had just shot. So what did he do? He shot all the rest of them. He describes this. He shot all the rest of them, except I believe one. And he said, well, to shoot every one of them, that would kind of seem like murder. So that's how he, and so many were, when they came to this country, they just shot every animal in sight. And of course, they caused many animals who were in abundance when they came here, they caused them to go extinct. Carolina parakeet, the dodo, passenger pigeons who filled the skies. You couldn't even see, there were so many passenger pigeons in the skies, as John Muir, who wrote of his experience. Before, within a decade or two, they were all gone. And as he described very sadly, people said, oh, they loved the bonny birds, but they preferred shooting them and eating them in a pie. So that's what happened.
I think that's such an unfortunate situation, and it really shows how humanity has for so long just commoditized what different animals are. They don't look at them as individuals. They don't look at them as beings that have their own joys and fears. They look at them as, what can they do for me? But I just wanted to, if you don't mind, Karen, if you have a little bit more time, I just have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to pass on to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're in charge here. I'm just following directions.
Well, you're so interesting. You say so interesting. I keep wanting to hear more, so I get caught up in that. But
no. I'm ready to do whatever you want.
So, when you take in a rescued chicken or a rescued turkey, and they've come from situations that are very, very horrible, they don't often come in as fully healthy animals. Do they have a chance to live a long and healthy life, a happy life? What is the situation for most of the animals, for their lifespan and how they can live if they've come from some of those difficult situations?
Well, first of all, we've taken in just about every type of chicken, and turkeys have all been from the meat industry. We have not had wild turkeys here, but we have the pleasure of seeing some wild turkeys out and about here because we are surrounded by woods and we are in a rural area. But we've taken in chickens from cockfighting raids. We've taken in chickens from the meat chicken industry, the so-called broiler chicken industry. And we've taken in many hens over the years from the battery cage operations, and in some cases from so-called free range operations. And in some cases, people just had to give up their birds because they became sick or they became too old to care for them, and so on. So we have a very varied experiences with the different types of birds we have taken in over the years. The chickens who are in the worst, who are the most fragile, I'll put it that way, are the chickens from the meat industry. And the reason for that is they have been bred to be extremely heavy in a very short period of time. They're slaughtered at around 6 weeks of age, sometimes 5 weeks of age. 42 days is the time that is usually cited, but we're talking about a chick, really, a baby chick of barely a month, a little over a month old, who is the size of a small turkey, really. They weigh anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 pounds, whereas a newborn normal chick will weigh about barely a pound at 6 weeks old. So, actually we have a picture on our website of a chicken who fell off a truck on the way to the slaughter plant. his name is like not coming into my mind at this exact moment, but anyway, he lived in our kitchen. He had to have one wing amputated because he had lost a wing. He had broken when he fell off the truck. And then we had this little hen, and she was like a little black hen. He was a big white rooster, and she was a little black hen, and her name was Gabby. And you could see the difference because they were roughly the same age, 6 weeks old, so 7 weeks by that time. And she came from a different place. She came from a school hatching project, and we've taken in a number of birds from school hatching projects. Yeah. So you see her sitting on his back, running under his wings. And of course, he was just like so happy because he was in a nice, comfortable kitchen. He had good food. He was being cared for and loved. And now he had this little creature darting around him and bringing life into his life. And I do have to tell this one quick story as I continue to answer your question. One day, and speaking about the intelligence of chickens and their sentience, one day I was here, as I always am practically, at the computer working. It was around 9 o'clock in the morning, and I had been in the kitchen with this rooster and little Gabby the hen, and all of a sudden Gabby, who was just a baby, came chirping loudly into my office here. And she was obviously distressed about something. So I followed her. She was showing me to come into the kitchen. I went into the kitchen with her, and lo and behold, I looked where this rooster had always been sitting, and he wasn't there. And I went around the corner, and there between the stove and the radiator, he had had a heart attack, which these chickens bred for the meat industry have all the time. And little Gabby, she knew something bad had happened to him, even though, again, she was just a few weeks old. She knew something bad had happened to her friend. Maybe she knew he was dead. And she came rushing in here to tell me and to get me to come out there. So, I mean, that's one of a million stories I could tell that I've experienced through the years, showing that, chickens are very aware of what's happening. They know how to communicate what concerns them and to get your attention. And that's one of the things I will never forget.
Wow, that is amazing. It makes me wish I had worn waterproof mascara, I tell you. It brings tears to your eyes, right? Oh my gosh.
I mean, they're very viscerally aware. They're very cognitively aware. They're very emotionally aware. They have emotional intelligence. But I do want to say something about the hens from the egg industry compared to the chickens from the meat industry. With proper care, they can live several years. You have to watch their diet. That in particular. But they want to be out in the fresh air. They haven't changed one bit as far as wanting to be out in the fresh air, in the sunshine. They want to take dust baths, they want to take sun baths, and they want to do all those things. And if the chickens from the meat industry can perch on a low rung on a chicken ladder or on a bale of straw, they will do that as long as they can still hoist themselves up onto something off the ground. That's their preference. But what I wanted to say about the hens who have been bred specifically for excessive egg production for the egg industry, they are in much better condition than the chickens bred for the meat industry. Their big problem, certainly in the United States, is that they're white, like the Cornish crosses are white, so they could never camouflage themselves out in the woods. They're pure white, so they would stick out and any predator would find them in a second. However, they can go into the trees. And in fact, those little white leghorn hens from the egg industry, they almost all sleep in the bushes and the trees at night. And it's just wonderful to watch them in the evening as they gather and choose which limbs they're going to sit on, and sometimes one will push the other off. And, there's all this commotion in the evening, all this commotion. And just like the man describing the turkeys, all this commotion and playing games and everything, the same with these hens, and of course the roosters with them, is the moment comes when all the commotion is over and it's complete silence. Everybody's settled into where they're going to spend their night, and you don't hear another sound until very early in the morning, because chickens, and I assume turkeys too, see sunlight an hour, 45 minutes to an hour before human beings do, because they see infrared light. They see the full spectrum of light from infrared to ultraviolet. So when they crow in the dark and people complain about that, well, it's because for them, it's not dark anymore.
Yeah.
They're ready to start their day.
I did not know that. That is so interesting. I did not know that. I have an interesting question here. There's someone in our audience that's actually seen a video of chickens breaking up a fight between rabbits. Have you seen?
They do what?
Breaking up a fight between another species, between rabbits. Have you seen chickens break up conflict and how they deal with conflict when they see others?
Here's kind of what I've seen. I mentioned how two little hens will get into a tiff, a little altercation with each other. Sometimes the rooster will run between them and sort of try to break that up, or at least intervene in some way. I have seen that. Usually the hens kind of resolve it on their own. I'll tell you something about turkeys though, because this was really interesting. Years ago, we had Mila and Priscilla, and they were from the turkey meat industry, pure white turkeys. And they had completely opposite temperaments, personalities. Mila was a very gentle, quiet turkey, very attentive, but she seemed happy. She was a peaceful turkey. Whereas Priscilla was the opposite. You could tell she was angry, maybe because of how she had been treated before. She wanted to brood her eggs. She would love to have been a mother, I thought. Mila wasn't so much into that, but Priscilla would go off into the wooded area. This was when we were still in Maryland, and we didn't have the predator proofing that we have here now. We had to bring everybody in at night and put them in their predator proof houses. So Priscilla was always kind of angry, and she hated being taken off her nest, but we did it for her protection, and we had to do that. But anyway, so one of the things that she would do when she would get into an angry mood, you could see the colors in her snood, that piece of flesh that hangs down in front of their face, and all of those caruncles, those bubbly things all over their faces, would turn a kind of dark mulberry color, and her face was angry, and she would charge me or Alan, my husband, or whoever human beings, not anybody else, but human beings, and she would start making tracks toward us. And Mila would immediately pick up these signals, and she would come between Priscilla's target, like the person, the human, and Priscilla, and Mila had this like yelping sound that sounded like, Priscilla, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And Mila would go back and forth between Priscilla and us. And gradually Priscilla would calm down. It was very, very clear that Mila understood Priscilla's mood and was acting in a protective way toward me or Alan, or again, whoever the target may have been. And she was successful in getting Priscilla to calm down. So as far as chickens are concerned, roosters will Sometimes try to get between the two hens. Sometimes I'll just kind of run around them. So it just differs. It really, they have traits in common, but each really is an individual. They have their own temperaments and what they will or will not do at certain times in their life, at certain ages of their life, and so forth.
When you get a chicken in or a turkey and they've come from a place that isn't that has not been a good experience for them, how can you tell when they start to feel happy? You've done so much observation, and I hear little bits of that in your conversation.
How can I tell when they're happy?
When do you start watching them and say, oh my God, this soul is happy now?
When they're unhappy or happy?
When they're happy.
Well, chickens, I always say that, if there's one characteristic that defines chickens when they're not being abused and when they're not utterly disconsolate, they're cheerful. Chickens are very cheerful birds, and it's very obvious. First of all, their voices are very cheerful sounding. Their clucks are, and so they have many more vocalizations than just clucks. And I'm not going to sit here and try to imitate them and do them that disservice, because it would be. But they have murmurs. They have all kinds of voices. And depending upon what they're doing and responding to and communicating to one another, and roosters too. I love to listen to roosters. They do more than crow. They have all kinds of voices. And when you spend time with them, you get to know their voices. And there's no mistaking when their voices are expressing happiness and pleasure and they're having a good time versus when they're not having a good time. And generally, when they're not happy, they're silent. They become very silent and still for the most part. And then chickens who are happy, well, their eyes are very bright and they're very attentive. They're looking at things, they're watching things. So let's see, their tails are up. And their body language is, they're up. They're not drooping toward the ground. When a chicken is not feeling good, when she might be developing some type of respiratory infection, for example, or if it's a rooster, if they're not feeling good, or there's just something not going right with them, they tend to droop. And so you know there's something wrong, whether it's an infection or whatever it may be. It's very obvious. But chickens run around all day, and of course in the afternoon they like to sit under the trees, preen their feathers, and just they like the breezes. They like the breezes in their feathers, and you can just tell. And again, the chickens really watch, and so do turkeys. And that reminds me of one of the really nice and very memorable parts of Joe Hutto's book, Illumination in the Flatlands, about the baby turkeys he raised to adulthood, is how he had them on a table and he put his chin on the table so that he would be at eye level with them as they hatched. And he talks about how they look very intently at you. They looked very intently at him, because their eyes were all on the same level. And he said, and I can say absolutely, if you want to have a relationship with your chicken or your turkeys, you must make eye contact with them, because that is one of the ways they socialize. That's one of the ways they get to know each other as families, as members of a flock, between them and you. And otherwise, all they know you as, they only know you at the level of your feet, your shoes or your boots. And so they have to look up at you, and you want to establish a sort of equality between you and them. And that makes a difference in the kind of relationship you're going to have with them, with the kind of trust they're going to have in you. So eyes are very, very important. And see, a lot of people who, they keep chickens, but they never really relate to them, mainly because they're keeping them for some utilitarian purpose or other. They never make eye contact with their birds. And in fact, would even think that was like anthropomorphism or something, that was ridiculous. But it isn't ridiculous. It's very important because, again, chickens and turkeys have much better eyes than we do, and they use their eyes constantly for everything they do, their eyes and their ears. So it's very important to make eye contact with them. And again, you can just being with them, all I have to do is walk out the kitchen door, and they're going to come running up. And now it isn't just for food. I mean, of course, they love every type of treat, and it doesn't matter. Even if it's almost nothing, they're all excited about it. The roosters call the hens, or the hens will call each other. And, they love whole grain bread, and they love grapes, and, they just about anything you put out there, they're all thrilled and excited about it. And they call each other, and they come rushing. And, when you talk about the beauty of chickens, one of the things I love is how when they walk, they pick up one foot after the other, and the one foot, they're very balletic in the way they pick up one foot, and then it's kind of curved, and then they put it down on the ground, and the other foot. I mean, you have to pay attention to them, and then you notice this all the time. And even the chickens who have been bred for meat, they're the way they kind of plod up toward you, sometimes pretty hastily. They'll hastily come toward you, and the heavy turkeys too. But even their way of walking it has a certain charm to it, and it's just they're eager for things. Chickens and turkeys know how to be happy. And another thing about turkeys that many people are not aware of, I was not aware of, and until I read it and saw pictures of how turkeys swim. Now, I have never heard of a chicken swimming, but chickens love water. And of course, another example of, they're intelligent. In the tropical forest, they're not likely to have encountered a swimming pool or a pool of water, but you never find a chicken falling into the duck pond or the duck pool. They will perch on the end, they will perch on the rim of the duck pool, and they will drink water. They'll go way down and drink water as far as need be, but they never make the mistake of falling into the water. They know that is not the element in which they are intended to be. And so they don't fall into water. But turkeys, on the other hand, and you can go to, on our website under turkeys, you can see we have a slideshow there on our turkeys webpage that includes two images of turkeys swimming. One is a young turkey, a baby turkey, and the other is an adult turkey. And has been described by these early so-called explorers, the early invaders of the Americas. They were fascinated at how turkeys could swim a mile or more. Baby turkeys, adult turkeys. So turkeys are at home in every outdoor element. Only the very, very coldest regions of Canada and I believe upstate New York were the only parts of this continent where turkeys were not found. So they swim, they're at home in the water, they're at home in the air, they're at home in the trees, and they're at home on the earth, on the ground. And turkeys love to walk. And chickens too, they walk all over the place. And they flutter their wings here and there. And their earth, I say the worst thing that you can do to these birds is to deprive them of their earth rights. They have a right to be on the earth because they emerged from the earth, and that's where they're at home. But turkeys are at home basically everywhere except in a factory farm.
Oh, that without a doubt, that's true for any animal. Absolutely. Karen,
Right.
We've already gone 20 minutes over time, and I so appreciate that you were willing to take the extra time and answer some questions. Your enthusiasm, your knowledge, your observations are so inspiring. I thank you so much for spending the time with us. I'm definitely
the time went, I don't know about for you or for anybody who happens to be tuning in here, but for me, the time, I can't believe it's over. Really?
I can't either. I can't either. I was shocked when I looked at the time and I thought, oh my gosh. But I also want to thank our wonderful participants, people that joined us for this session. I know that you've all learned a lot. I've learned so much. And Karen, thank you. This has been so informative.
Carrie.
I look forward to learning more from your website. And to everybody that attended today, we will see you at our next presentation.
Well,
thank you so much, Karen.
It's been a real pleasure. It's been a great privilege. And I'm so happy to talk turkey and to stick up for chickens. I always say, you know, we have a button that says stick up for chickens, and we have a button that says speaking for turkeys, don't gobble me. That's what turkeys united. Don't gobble me. So really, all animals, don't gobble me. That's what they're trying to tell us. So we need to listen and do what they say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everyone.
It's been great.